itself to exploit the North American continent, to transform the North American continent into real estate, to privatize the land. And to heck with the fur trade, to heck, I mean, Indians are going to have to go. That's, so, the United States is a far more genocidal country. And this is, one of the, I keep playing on this theme, and nobody wants to argue with me about it so far. Although I got an invitation to go to Tokyo on December 1819, and I got an assignment to give a talk at the UN University in Tokyo 2 months from now on the colonial lineage of the War on Terror. So I'm trying to connect all of this history to the War on Terror. And I think the patterns that the United States is demonstrating right now, a lot of this history, a lot of the dynamics of this, the psychology of it, is rooted in the history, and it's this history that I'm explaining to you right here. So, Thomas Jefferson, he is particularly offended by the Royal Proclamation. He puts out a theory of settler rights. He calls it a allodial title. And basically, he frames it all in terms of the right of Anglo-Saxons. The Normans conquered the Anglo-Saxons in England in, 1066, and he feels that their liberties and their freehold land tenure was preempted by a fraudulent monarch. And he tries to sort of read all of this history back into North America, essentially trying to explain the land title in a way that counters the Royal Proclamation, counters the King George's recognition of lands reserved to the Indians as their hunting grounds. So in the Declaration of Independence, you've all heard of the Declaration of Independence. When's the Declaration of Independence? What day does it come into being in the year? July the 4th, right? You go to any American city on July the 4th, and it's a big celebration. The Declaration of Independence, is one of the most famous political manifestos, if not the most famous political manifesto ever. And it begins with, we hold these truths to be self-evident. It reaffirms the equality of man and the right of every man to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Lincoln and the Gettysburg Address, transforming the Civil War into an issue of slavery. He quotes, the Declaration of Independence and elevates the Declaration of Independence. So the Declaration of Independence affirms the idea that all human beings, it actually says men, but let's say that, they meant, and they did mean men because women didn't get the vote, and certainly slaves didn't get the vote. But let's sort of think of it as saying, all human beings. It's acknowledging that all human beings are equal, and it's saying, we're going to create a country based on that principle, and we're going to have the rule of law apply equally to everybody. We're going to have democracy. I mean, that's where we started with Kofi Annan lecturing George Bush and saying, if you're going to have the rule of law, it has to apply to everybody, even you, George Bush, even the United States. So the United States is founded on this principle. But then the Declaration of Independence goes on to list King George's crimes and misdemeanors, basically justifying the American Revolution, saying we can't recognize King George's sovereignty any longer because he's a tyrant, because he's a dictator, because he's Saddam Hussein. I mean, in a way, the idea, it's a very good strategy if you're doing a war. It's complex to say, well, the British Parliament and the Constitution and the laws, but if you can make King George as an individual into a demon, It's much easier to convey that, eh? So it gives all the crimes and misdemeanors of King George, and then it says that he brought on the merciless Indian savages. So his final crime is the declaration of something referring to North Americans indigenous as merciless Indians. Their known rule of warfare is an undistinguished destruction of all ages, sexes, and conditions. That's mind-boggling when you think about it. And I say this is like the origins of the War on Terror. You know, the War on Terror says there's a class of people who are so violent, who are so prone to anarchy, that we can't extend them the law because they're unpredictable and they'll exploit it. There's no law in Guantanamo Bay in Cuba. There's no idea that, well, you can get a lawyer, and people are fighting it, and gradually there is some degree of, there's some tension there. But, Abu Ghraib, I mean, you fall into one of these prisons right now, and you get the category of terrorist or potential terrorist on you, and anything goes. There's no rules there. There's no rule of law there. So the argument I'm making is that this isn't new in American history. The American Declaration of Independence, created this category of savages whose known means of warfare is undistinguished destruction of all ages, sexes, and conditions. In other words, they're terrorists. It's a racial profiling. If you're an Indian, you're a savage, you're a merciless, and you're prone to kill women, kill children, to strike out. So there's no dealing with you in terms of the law.